Hi, this is Everett, Everett's Watercolors. Welcome to my studio. Now today I'm going to do, before I say that, I'm broadcasting live from Chesapeake, Virginia. And all of you out there that are listening in on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Twitch, welcome aboard and hope you enjoy the show. I'd like to hear from you. Give me some comments and let me know what you think. And I'll get right back to you. Gloria's in the studio with me today.
Hello.
And she'll be monitoring the broadcast and checking on the chat comments. Well, today I'm going to do some special techniques, and it's called multi-masking. And what that is I'm going to do a small painting, and I'm going to do 3 layers of colorful washes. And in between each layer, I'm going to mask out another area. That's why I call it multiple masking, because I'm doing several layers of masking with 3 layers of watercolor. So I think you'll find it to be an interesting technique. And also, I've got a lot of tips today about using masking fluid. So I'm really looking forward to getting to that. So let me go to my painting table. I'll go over to my overhead camera, and I'll get you over there. I got to turn off that little text I want to take off. Let me try that again. I'm going to try it one more time. Overhead. Take it off. Let's get it working. Okay, now we're okay. Okay, and I'm going to turn on the chat room. Oh, the chat's live now. I'll move over to my painting table. Turn on my light. Okay, we're ready for business. Okay, the first thing I want to go over today is let's go over my painting setup here, what paints I'm going to use. This is my masking fluid here, and I'll go over that in a few moments. Let me move this aside. Let's go over my the paints I'm going to be using today. The 4 colors I'm going to use is Quinacridone Gold, and let me show you where it is on the palette. Be down here on the right, bottom right. That's Quinacridone Gold. Cobalt Blue up here at the top. Then I'm going to use Alizarin Crimson, which is a real dark red, powerful red, beautiful. And then the 4th color is going to be burnt sienna down here at the bottom left. Okay, now these are Holbein Artist Watercolors, and they're available on my website, everettswatercolors.com. And also, I'm going to be using a lot of incredible white mask. That's the white mask fluid I'm going to be using today. So what I've got here on my, as I do on most of my demonstrations, I have a little what I call a mixing chart that I use. And let me go over that a little bit. What I've done here is I've taken the main color I'm going to use to mix with it. This is Quinacridone Gold, which is a nice yellow, mixing with the burnt sienna. It gives me a real dark brown. And also, Alizarin Crimson will also give me a darker brown, with a little bit of red in it, a little bit of warmer color. So those are 2 mixes there I'll be using today. The Quinacridone Gold with the burnt sienna and with the Alizarin Crimson. Another color I'm going to be using is, of course, Cobalt Blue mixed in with the burnt sienna. That'll give me another nice dark mix. So that burnt sienna mixed in with the Alizarin Crimson and also mixed in with the Cobalt Blue will give me a nice dark color. And of course, the Alizarin Crimson with Cobalt Blue gives me a real dark purple, even a darker color. Now, right here, I'm showing here a gradual shift. I'm going from the yellow, which is the Quinacridone Gold, into the burnt sienna, and into the red, which is the Alizarin Crimson. That's a real nice transition of color. That'll be one of my first washes right there. That color's right there. Then down here, this is really, if you look at the color wheel, the yellow, red, and blue. This is a primary combination. Yellow, the red, which is the Alizarin Crimson, and then the blue, the Cobalt Blue. So I wanted to show you a combination of that. And when you mix the primaries together, the yellow, red, and blue, you get a gray. You always get a gray when you mix the primary colors. Up here, I'm also mixing the burnt sienna and the cobalt blue. Gives me a nice dark mixture. Gives me a dark brown, but you can see the colors here when they mix together. So that was my mixing chart is really the colors I'm going to be using today and how I'm going to mix them. Now down here at the bottom, I have a little demonstration here of the masking. And kind of want to just demonstrate that a little bit. First of all, let me introduce the white mask, the Incredible White Mask Kit. This is also on my website, everettswatercolors.com. The Incredible White Mask Kit includes the white mask fluid in a 2-ounce bottle. It also has a dipstick, which I'm going to show you a lot today, how to use the dipstick. And also the liquid frisket remover, which is also the rubber cement pickup or liquid frisket remover. So that comes into the kit, and it's on my website, everettswatercolors.com. So that's what I'm going to be demonstrating today a lot in the painting. Set that aside. Now in my masking kit, what I have, let me show you some of the tools I use. This is a synthetic brush, a little glare right there. A synthetic brush, and it's really a nylon brush is what it is, but it works very well. But if you're going to use masking, you want to use an old brush or use a synthetic brush that you really have used before, but it still will do the job. Okay, and that's all you really need is an old watercolor brush. The dipstick. The dipstick comes in several, but this is one variety here. It has a nice point to it, and I can get all kinds of detail with that. I can get a flat edge. I can use the corner to get a sharp edge and do details. And of course, the liquid frisket remover or the rubber cement pickup is just a piece of rubber, but that's used to take the masking fluid off. So that's the third component. Now, some of the things I use in here, I also use a piece of sandpaper. Now, what I use that for is when I'm using the masking fluid and I go into, I get some on there. I use this also to clean my nib off, because sometimes the masking fluid will get on the nib and start to build up a little bit. So I use the sandpaper to clean it off. And another tool I use a lot is the toothpick. And I have a box of toothpicks here that I use. And I'll demonstrate a little bit of that today also, but let me show you what I did. So that's really my mask. That's really my white mask kit. I have brushes, the dipstick, and the liquid frisket remover. The other thing I have two other items. I have two other things. I have a bucket of water, bucket of clear water, and I have an old terry cloth towel. And I'll show you how I use both of these. Okay, old terry cloth towel. So what I did down here, let's talk about this. What I did down here on this little section here, on just the white paper, I went in. I used the brush. Number one, if I'm gonna cover a large area, I'll use the brush because I can make bigger brush strokes with that. So this section right here was used the brush. On these two sections here, I use the dipstick, put into it, and I use the edge of the dipstick to give me a nice mark. And I'm going to take the rubber cement pickup, and you just pull it like this, and then I covered it with a simple wash of that Quinacridone Gold and a little bit of burnt sienna. That's all I did. So if I wanted to save the white paper, then that's what I would do. I would put the masking fluid on, let it dry thoroughly. It takes about 15 minutes, 20 minutes for it to dry, and then cover it with the paint that you're going to use, the color you want to use. In this case, I used this combination up here. Okay, on the second section, I used a 2-layer. I took the brush and did a brush stroke here, one brush stroke here. Then I took the dipstick and did two Now I use the edge of it. I use the edge, and I got a finer line. And here I just dopped it right there. I made 3 dots. And then I covered it with. Let me back up. I covered first of all. I put down a wash of burnt sienna. Then I covered it with white mask. Let the white mask dry. Then I covered it again with the Quinacridone Gold on top. So I masked. What I did was I masked out the burnt sienna underneath, and I covered it with the yellow. So let me take that. Let me take that one. So this is really a multi-masking, right? This is really a multi-mask layer right here. So now I take this off. Okay. So now this demonstration here shows that I can paint on white paper and then cover it with white mask, and then cover it again after I mask it. So I can cover paint with the masking fluid, and it doesn't do any. It doesn't hurt anything. So that's the second layer. Here I covered just the white paper. Here I covered the painted paper, and put another layer on top. Okay, now this section here, I did 3 layers of paint. I put down. In fact, what I did here was I used the tip of the dipstick. And you see how small, how fine line I can get in there. I made my initial C. And here I used the dipstick edge and made a couple marks down here. So I used the dipstick for this part of the exercise right here. First of all, I put down. I think I started with the yellow. And then I masked that out with a C. And then I covered it with burnt sienna. And I put down some more paint. And then I covered then I masked it again. And I went over it with the Cobalt Blue and burnt sienna. So there's really 3 layers of paint here. So I'll remove the masking fluid here now. So here you can see the first layer I had the yellow in. I saved that with masking fluid. And the second layer I had burnt sienna, and I covered that before I put the third layer on. Okay, so there's an example of 2 layers of masking with 3 layers of paint. First layer was the yellow. Second layer was the burnt sienna, and the third layer of paint was with the cobalt blue and burnt sienna. So I've shown here a single layer, a double layer, and a triple layer of painting with 2 layers of masking fluid. Now down here, to demonstrate, not demonstrate, but to show you, I used the toothpick. Excuse me. I dipped that into the Brisket film, and I went ahead and I just did it across here, so I can get a real fine mark with a toothpick. And then down here, I did something else. I went with a dipstick, put down some masking fluid, and then I took the toothpick and I scratched up the edge a little bit. This would look like grass. After the masking fluid dried, I painted over here. I put cobalt blue on this one, and I put a little bit of burnt sienna and cobalt blue mixture here on this one. So let me take the masking fluid off here. So I'm able to get a very fine edge with you can use almost anything to put masking fluid. You can use a palette knife. You can use a sharp tool. Here I use a toothpick, whatever. So there's all kinds of ways to put down masking fluid. And then here I wanted to show a little bit of variation in the shape, so I could even simulate grass or something with the masking fluid and cover it up with paint. Okay, well that shows my my mixing plan or mixing schedule of the mixtures I'm going to use, and also a little bit about masking itself. Okay, so let me move this aside. Put it in the right place so I don't step on it. Okay. Okay, let's go over my little painting plan today. So let me get this over here. I'll need this a little bit later. This was my inspiration. This is an old log cabin. The title of today's painting is Woods and Cabin. So I found a picture of an old cabin building in the woods. So that was kind of my go-to picture to look at. And so that was my first reference photograph. Then I decided, usually there's an old tree stump out here in the foreground. So I found a picture of an axe and some chopped wood. So that was my second reference photograph. Okay, so those were two references. Okay, then I drew up as I always do, I draw up my sketch. So I have my building here with some trees, and I have my axe over here and a stump. And I'll bring this up close so you can see that. You can take a snapshot of that if you want to. That's my drawing. That's my drawing scheme for today's painting. Now, you'll notice here that if you look at the sketch and look at the drawing, this looks awful complicated. But I'm going to show you today how this can be simplified, because I'm going to be blocking out a lot of this detail with masking fluid and then paint over top of that. So I won't have to work very hard getting some of the detail on this to make it come out. So that's one of the things about masking is very important, is you can mask out areas and make your painting a lot simpler to handle. Also down here, I've even put down my painting step, because what I'm going to do, because masking fluid takes a little while to dry, and I don't want to take the time here on live broadcast. So I've set up a couple stages with already a dried stage. So I got myself planned out here of how I want to do that. So it was more complicated to prepare the demonstration than it was to do the painting. If I was going to do the painting, I would just sit there and mask, let it dry, cover it up with paint, and then mask again. But because I wanted to demonstrate the masking and use a more timely, efficient way, I did it in a couple steps. So I'm going to show you a step-by-step multiple masking techniques on watercolor paper. Put that aside. All right, and I transferred the sketch to I transferred the main sketch. This is the main sketch I have. Okay, this is my design sketch, the building and the trees and so forth. So the first layer, I'm really concerned about getting this in correctly. So that's really the first layer I'm really concerned about. The foreground trees, a few rocks or stumps, and the building itself. The background is going to come in later. Now, my intention here was looking at this picture and also looking at this diagram. I said, well, what I'm going to do, my painting plan is, I think I'm going to have a dramatic ray of light coming this way. So I'm going to show a shadow pattern off of the building. So it's really going to be a dark background with a light foreground, with a light coming across here. So this area is going to be light. This will be in shadow, and then the trees will be in light because they're forward of the building. So these will be light, and then everything else will be a little bit darker. So that's really my approach here to what I'm going to do. So my first step then is going to be to do a colorful wash on this first layer. Let me put this water aside. So my first mix is going to be really two colors. I'm going to use the hake brush also. Okay, I'm going to use the hake brush. This is a large hake brush. I'm going to use that to wet down the paper, and then I'm going to use these two quill brushes, which are natural hair. I'm going to wet them up. These are both from Silverbrush, and this is also Silverbrush Hake. And this one's on my website, everettswatercolors.com. Now, what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to mix up a little bit of that Quinacridone Gold, a beautiful yellow color. It's a really rich yellow is what it is. Quinacridone Gold. That's going to be the color, that's going to be the sunlight. That's going to be my sunlight, Quinacridone Gold. Then my second one, I'm going to mix up a little bit of the burnt sienna with my second brush. A little bit of the burnt sienna, maybe a touch of that Alizarin Crimson. Burnt sienna, a touch of Alizarin Crimson. Be a nice, rich brown, but still a warm color, still warm. Okay, there are my two colors. I got two mixers with two brushes, okay? I have a warm color and I have a little warmer color with the red in it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wet the paper. First step one. So I'll use the Hake brush. I'm going to go ahead and going to go all the way across the painting and wet the paper. That'll guarantee that I'll get a nice flow of paint. Okay, that's the first step. Now the second step I'm going to go through, I'm going to bring in that nice wash of yellow. This is the sun hitting the front of that building. That's the sun hitting that building. And the second part of the wash is going to be the shadows or the areas around. So when you paint like this, and you know you're just going to get a background in, just a background color, I'm going to pick some more of that yellow up. You can go very quickly because you're just getting a wash in. Okay, so then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and dry it. And also, when you put down a wash, I watch the edges of my painting because what will happen is if you have a little bit of liquid on the edges, it could creep in. So I take a tissue and wipe off the excess moisture on the edge before I finish drying it. Okay, because if it creeps in, it'll create blossoms. Okay, takes about a minute and a half or a little over a minute to do that. Now, a couple of steps here, preparation. Now, this diagram here is the same diagram I started with. Remember, this is my original sketch. Now, this is my masking plan. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mask in these areas, the foreground trees, the front of the building where the light is coming through and hitting the front of the building. I'm even going to mask out the windows over here, okay? So that's my masking plan. So what I do here is I get my mask material ready to go. Let me set this aside. So first of all, I want that, I need my tub of water. You can see that. I think I'll leave it right there, okay? And I'm going to use the brush, first of all. And I don't need that. I don't need that. And I may, let's see, will I need this? Yeah, I might use a little bit of that. Okay. So really, mainly, the main idea here now is to cover up those areas. So, put aside the brush. Now, what on masking fluid, you keep that top on that masking fluid tight at all times. You only open it up when you're going to use it. And when it's closed, what I do sometimes, almost every day, when I'm sitting here painting, I'll turn this over upside down and let it mix itself. Okay, you don't want to shake it up. That's a no-no, because that'll create air bubbles, and that'll give you lumps in your masking. So you can stir it with a stick, then you'll have masking fluid on the stick. But I think the best way to do is just turn it upside down, let it go upside, and then bring it back. That'll give it a nice gentle mixing, and that'll keep the fluid nice and mixed inside. Okay. Now the first step I do is I wet the brush. This is very important. Years ago, when I was masking, I used soap, ivory soap. I thought that was, if you watch most of the masking programs, you'll see people using soap. Don't use it. You don't need it. Just keep your brush wet. Keep it moist. Then you dip into the jar. I'll call it a jar. And now I'm going to put I'm masking these trees right now. Okay. And I'm going to mask the front of this building over here. So a brush will cover a nice big area. And I'm following my masking plan. You know, I have a painting plan. I have a drawing plan for my shadows and so forth. I have a mixing plan. I have a value plan. Now I'm having I just showed you my masking plan. And then I'm going to cover, see what I'll do here now. There's a shadow, so I'm going to put a little more here. This is the cast shadow across the front of this building. So I'm masking the areas I want to maintain. I want to keep the color. Here's that little window area. I'm going to put some masking over here in the window. And then this big tree over here. Now, I wash the brush out a lot. Keep that brush moist, and then blot it out on a towel. By keeping that brush moist, it keeps the masking fluid from solidifying quickly. Because if you let it dry, it'll go into the bristles very quickly. So if you use a brush, so rinse it out. Dab that brush. And I think I'll put a little more on. I'm going to put some on the ground. These are all the big areas I want to get covered. This will be the light going across the ground. All I'm doing is dipping into the jar. Now rinse that brush out. I rinse that brush out really good. Now you'll notice that if you keep that brush wet, there's no accumulation. There's no accumulation of liquid frisket in that brush. It's just as clean as it was before. So by rinsing it out in the water and then taking the excess moisture off on the towel, and then going right into the masking fluid, it'll keep your brush clean and it'll keep it going on forever. I've had this brush now for like 7 years, so it's really good. Now, for some little detail, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to wet the dipstick in the water, dip it into and then for these little details, like to say the branches on this tree here, which are a little bit smaller. I could have used the brush, but I wanted to demonstrate also using and also the post out here on the front of this porch. Okay. And a little axe. Now over here, the actual axe handle is put there, so I can use that now again, rinse it just like the brush. Rinse it out with water and blot it off. By rinsing it out, you're gonna keep that nib very clean by rinsing it in water. No accumulation. Okay. And while I'm letting this thing dry, I'm gonna put the lid back on the masking fluid. Okay. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've masked out the area. Now it's going to take about 15 or 20 minutes for this to dry. So I've gone ahead and done another version. Okay, this is one I did. This is one I did a couple days ago, but it's the same. It's the same. You can see the masking on there. I'll tilt it a little bit. You see the glare. Okay, that's the masking fluid on there. Okay. All right. So once you do the masking and it gets dry, now you're ready for the second application of paint. So let's go ahead and do that. So what I want to do now is get my water bucket out of the way. And my second wash is going to be, really, I'm going to cover just the shadow pattern around the house and put some more background color in there. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit more of that Alizarin Crimson. So I'm not going to put any yellow in this mixture. This mixture is just going to be the burnt sienna and the Alizarin Crimson. That's going to be a darker color. And I'm also going to use another brush because for the flat brush, what I want to do is be able to put in some edges on this. So let's start with that. Let me start in the background first of all. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to put in the background color. I'm using the quill brush, the number 10 quill brush from a silver brush. So now I'm putting in a darker color in the background. And I'm not going to change the color on. I could put extra other colors in here, but I decided just to keep it really simple. I just want to use a simple palette, a basic palette, just a few colors, just to show the demonstration. Now, I'm really going to control the values here. A little more burnt sienna here on the building. I'll differentiate that there. I'll put the building a little more in burnt sienna. And you can see right now, you can see the effect of that masking fluid. It's just it's protecting all those areas that I want to keep highlighted. So everything I want to keep. This is like a middle value. The light value was the first layer I put down was a light value. Now I'm putting a middle value. And I'm making sure I cover up all the areas that are not covered with the masking fluid because I don't want to have any. I didn't want to have any loose little bunnies running around. Now, if I wanted to add, say, a little more of that red, if I want to add a little more red in there, I could, I could add little color accents if I want to put a little streak of something in there. So I could modify what I have, but right now I'm happy with what I have. Okay. Okay. Now I would go ahead. Now once I finish this, now I would go ahead and dry this out, and ready to go on to the next stage. Okay. I'm going to dry it out. Let me make sure I got the excess moisture on the edges. Looks good. A little bit more. Okay. So I put down the second layer, and now I'm going to go to a third phase. So what I've done is I put in after the masking, I went and did a second layer of paint. Now we're going to mask some more. So this is my masking plan for stage 3. This is in blue. If you'll recall, I did this. The first stage was here, which is done there. Then I painted it over with another layer of color. Now I'm going to add a third layer of masking, or second layer of masking. And these are the areas I'm going to be masking in. The top of the roof a little bit to protect. And I'm going to put some more. I'm going to mask out some trees away in the background before I put the darks in. And I'm going to save some of these colors here in the foreground, just a little bit, give it some variety. So that's my masking plan for stage 3. So what I'm going to do now is get my tools and use my bucket of water. In this case, I'm doing a lot of little trees. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the dipstick. I don't have to worry about mixing up my fluid because I've already had it mixed up before. It'll stay mixed up pretty well. You can see how it congeals. It's just a rubber latex material, and it solidifies. If you leave it in air, if you leave it on the air, it'll dry out. So you want to keep it covered and keep it protected. All right, so I'm going to use the dipstick here to put in some of those trees, and I'm going to use my masking plan. What I'm going to do here is I'll leave the dipstick there, and you can see me move it now. I'm going to now dip it in. First, I went into the water, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to put in some trees. Trees in the background. Might have to put it in several times. Wash out that. I hit the water now. Put the water on that dipstick. Keep that dipstick clean. I'm going to put another tree in here. These are background trees. They're just going to be like in the shadow. They don't have to be really defined that well. Just to show indication that there's a tree back there in the background. So these are just to give the painting a little more interest. And I'm really drawing with this dipstick. I'm just drawing the shape that I want. I'm also going to cover the edge of this building right here because I want that to stay lighter when I put the darks on. And I'm going to also shade in or mask in the part of this chimney. I want to keep that lighter because the background is going to be much darker. Okay, I can put in some more trees. You'll notice I'm dipping in the dipstick each time into the water, keeping it nice and wet. I'm going to take off the excess fluid on the towel. And I'll have another one more big tree over here. I like this big tree on this side over here. And I also mentioned now also mentioned I'm gonna put a little bit on the roof edge. That'll keep it. And when I put the darks in there, that'll protect the edge, little edge of the building. I want the building to stand out a little bit. So I'm gonna mask in a little bit of the edge, just part of it, not all of it, and a little bit down here on this edge. That'll give me a little definition of the edges of the building. Okay. And down here in the foreground, I'll also mark off some of these logs or tree stumps I have here, because they're going to be darker when I put the next layer on. Okay. Now by keeping the dipstick wet, you can see here that I've kept it clean. It's just wet now, so all the edges are still clean, just by dipping it in the water and tipping on the towel and then back in. So I haven't got any more masking fluid or any accumulation of masking fluid on the dipstick. So that's how you use a dipstick. You keep it in water. You keep dipping in water just like with a brush, and then apply it and put the dipstick in the bottle and pour out the masking fluid. And if you do get accumulation on there for some reason, that's why I have the sandpaper, and that keeps it nice and clean. Also, that takes off that rubber cement. Okay. Now I could add detail with the toothpick and stuff like that, but anyway, okay. I'm going to put this aside. This is going to take another 15 minutes to dry. So here's the final. This is the final step here. I've gone ahead and this has all been masked in. You can see all the masking fluid on there. I'll move it around. You can see the shine. So that's the first mask, and then the second mask on top of that. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and paint in the background now. So we're done with the masking fluid. So what I do with my masking fluid is I make sure I put it real tight. I mean, I really crank it down. Make sure that's sealed completely tight before you put it away. There's no chance for that to dry out on you. Okay, and it'll last a long time. Okay, now the final phase is to put in the darks. So what I'm doing here now, I'm going to mix up burnt sienna, a little bit, still put a little bit of Alizarin Crimson in there, just to give it a little color. But now I've mixed in the Cobalt Blue, and that'll bring that dark brown, dark brown. Okay, I think I'll use the flat brush now. This is the Holbein's 3/4 inch flat brush, synthetic, and it's on my website, everettswatercolors.com. But I get a nice straight edge on this one. So this is the shadow side of this building. So I'm putting a nice dark color over here. On this edge. This is in shadow. I'm going to use a smaller brush. Now this is the Holbein 1/2 inch flat brush, synthetic. I'm going to use that darker color. And I've got a doorway here, which I'm going to put in shadow. And I'm just pretending that the doorway may be open. Who knows? Just make up a story. I want a doorway so I can tell it's there. It could be open, partially open, whatever. Okay. And on some of these stumps back down here, I got some color I want to put on. All right, but the majority I'm going to work on is the in the background is back here. So with that dark mix, but, and again, right now, because I have everything masked in, all I'm doing now is putting in a darker value. And maybe watch out for some areas that I don't want to cover, but right now I'm just putting in the dark shadows. And back here, maybe a little bit of background with some part of that sunlight is bouncing off the trees and hitting the ground over here. So I can, play around with that a little bit. But I want to go around the building with that darker color. Now mix up even darker. I'm going to put some of that Cobalt Blue mixed in. I want a darker color around. I want the building to really pop out. A little more Cobalt Blue in there. So I got the all the important areas masked off. So I don't worry about the edges of the building now, because remember I protected those with the white mask. And if I wanted to, I could use other colors in here. I could use the greens of the trees and so forth. That wasn't the part of the lesson today. The lesson today was to get the a good dynamic painting and showing the effect of using a white mask to do that. And I think up here what I'll do is I've got part of this. You can see I got part of that masked out, but I'm going to put just a little bit of texture up here on the rooftop. Just a little bit of texture. It's an old log cabin, so it's going to have shingles, old wooden shingles or something up on top. Let's see. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a cast shadow now from the sun that's coming across the front there. I'm going to have a cast shadow across the ground here. And I'm going to have a cast, this part over here is also going to have a cast shadow. It's going to be, this part will be in shadow. So the only lesson here to remember is that to mask out those areas you don't want to have paint on. That's all. That's all you got to remember. Just paint out the. It's like negative painting. You want to leave those areas on covered that you don't want to have paint on. But we're using positive painting now over top of the color. And some of these edges I can I always rather I don't like straight lines or anything like, so I make little. These are like little rough. It could be bushes back here or little rough grass, just to give us some texture. Okay. Okay, I'm ready to dry. So I'm gonna dry this out. Gotta watch those edges. Haven't had any problems yet, but you can create blossoms if you don't. Once you put paint down around the edge of a painting, if you have it taped down like this, you want to make sure you collect all the extra moisture on the edge, or else it'll create a blossom. There's a little bit of blossom better. I'm not gonna worry about that though. Okay. What I was doing here was because the paint will be still wet on top of the white mask. I was just picking up the little puddles that are there because in order to dry it so it didn't get mixed up when I take the mask off. So just a little tissue, pick up the little puddles that'll show because the paint will stay on top of that white mask just like a little puddle. It won't go into the paper. So we just pick it up with a little tissue. Make sure it's dry. Give it another. Make sure it's completely dry. Okay, now I think to take the mask off, I'm going to take the tape off this also. Take the tape on the outside. This green frog tape really works well. It doesn't tear the paper, it doesn't hold it down. It's just enough to keep it in place. Okay, now I'm gonna remove the white mask. So using my rubber cement pickup. Okay, now this I masked this out a couple days ago, and the white mask will stay on. You can leave it on for a couple weeks. It won't bother. It won't hurt anything. You don't want to leave it on too long, but there's no damage. It might be take a little harder as you longer leave it on. It'll just be harder to take off, but it's very user friendly. The thicker you put it on, it's not necessary to put it on real thick. Just put a real light layer, a little light coat, and it'll cover the paper. That's all you have to do. And that takes a little bit of practice about how much to put on the paper. Just get an old painting or just get some scratch paper and just practice with a white mask to see how much you need to cover a section, and then paint over it and then see what happens. I mean, it's just a matter of practice. Everything that gets done or better is done through practice. And I have found that I've really become a real fan of this white mask. This white mask is all I really need. That and my brush and that dipstick is all I need to do a painting. And I did this because I wanted to save a lot of white areas. And all this, it collects on the edge of the little pickup. And you just pick it off. You can leave it on, but I tend to take mine off. And then you can move your hand across it, and you can feel if there's any rough spots. You'll feel it. You'll feel the masking fluid underneath. So you run your left hand over it. I'm right-handed, so my left hand is my guide. And run your hand over, and you can feel the roughness there, and that's where the mask is. And you find it and wipe it off. There. Okay, now the only thing that's left to do on a painting like this is to clean up some of the edges. That's about all. So really, I'm going to just demonstrate a few things here that can be done. On this little window over here, I wanted to put in, so I'm going to just put in some window panes. So I just put a little bit of indication that there's a window. And let's see. Maybe I want to put a little more color on some of these stumps. Now these over here are a bunch of logs, so I can put a little bit of color in here. Show these are logs on the ground. And if you have edges that you want to clean up, you just take a little bit of paint and put the original color, say a burnt sienna, and a little bit of that cobalt blue, and you can go around. You can go in here and just paint in around the edges and clean up any of the rough spots. Just sharpen up the edges a little bit. Especially, let's say, I'll take this window for example here. I want to straighten the window a little bit. So make the Come along here and make the edges straight. Make it look more like a window shape, square, rectangular. There. And if I'm going to put a little detail. Let's say these posts now, there might be a shadow here on the post. So I put a little shadow pattern on the side of the post. So there's where you add a little bit of detail. Then on the edge of this porch here, a little shadow. And maybe the edge of the roof. So you're just adding a little bit of detail, bring a little more realism, a little more touch to the design. Now, what I like to do also is take some of that. I'll take there's a little bit of burnt sienna. And now here, if I look at the horizon line is right here, where I'm pointing, where my finger is. The horizon line is right here. And let's say I wanted to make these. We'll make the logs here. Let's say I've got a log cabin, so I'm going to make a log cabin here. And this, in perspective now, these logs would aim down a little bit as I go across. Then I could put in the shadow. There's some lines. And even up here in the top. Now the fact that I'm going up now, this is the horizon, so the lines are going to go upward. So I'm going to start down here. And as I go up, the angle is going to get a little bit steeper as I go up, looking at perspective. So there'll be some logs here in the log cabin. And I could take a little bit of color. It's just palette color, whatever is here, a little bit of brown, a little bit of blue, whatever. And just a light brush. And put a little bit of texture here on the top of this. It's some kind of material. We don't know. The little axe out here, I'm going to put a darker side to it. Make it look like it's a metal axe. Chopping the wood. And really, the only last thing I would do is take some of that palette color here and just what I would do is go across and put some shadow patterns in across the trees. Just either this light's coming off of limbs and so forth, casting shadows on it. Just break up those shapes a little bit. You got light coming through the branches, so you can just play with that a little bit, make it more believable. Okay, well that is really all I wanted to show. I got another one I want to show you my results of, but that is really the technique of using multiple masking. Getting a color down first light wash, then mask out those areas you want to keep light, and then color again with some darker medium color to put in the shadows and so forth, then mask it again that you want to keep those shadow colors, and then put in your darks to show the background and the real dark parts of the painting. Okay? But you have to dry in between each layer. You can't paint over top of the wet mask, so you have to go. So it's a little longer process to do a painting, but it really can be very, very effective. So let me show you one here that I did from start to finish. And put a little mask around it, put a little mat around it. You can see how dramatic that is. And what I also did, I added a little bit of Alizarin Crimson to the chimney, and I put a little bit of white Chinese white here to show some smoke. So my story here was that the light's on in the house, the light's on in the cabin. You can see the lights. Somebody's inside working, probably cooking dinner. And then the smoke coming out of the stack means that they're probably cooking using the stove. Okay, so that's a story. And the axe over here is cutting the wood with with the cut down trees and so forth. And the light coming through here is casting a nice dark shadow, but a nice bright sun coming across there. Either an early morning or afternoon or late afternoon shadow coming through the woods. Okay, that wraps up my demonstration today. Let me go back to my main camera. Yeah, let me turn it on. I'm coming to the main camera. I'll be right there. I'm coming soon. There we go. Hey, I see. Oh, I got somebody from LinkedIn on. How you doing? Nice to see you. And I'm sure there's other people. After the broadcast, I go and look around and see who's made comments. But thank you for your comments. And thank you for watching in. And I really enjoyed doing that. The thing about the masking fluid is it takes a little planning. And I think I showed you my planning steps. You just carefully plan out where you want to leave the masking, what your purpose is, and so forth. And it takes a little practice. But the thing is, those tools, using an old synthetic brush or an old water brush, and that dipstick, and to keep them wet, just put them in water. Don't worry. I used to use years ago. I thought I had to use soap and soap everything before I put the masking fluid. But as long as you keep that brush and dipstick wet, and then wipe it down a little, just hit the towel and then take the excess moisture off, and then dip it into the masking fluid. It'll stay fine. And then there's ways to clean out the dipstick with either your hands or use, like I say, I use a piece of sandpaper to keep it clean if there's any accumulation on it. But those tools will last a long time. My paintbrush I've used for years and years and years, and had no problem. And I've given up on using a soap on it anymore. I don't need it. Just use a little bucket of water, and you're in business. So I really enjoyed doing that today. And leave me some comments and some questions about what I did today. And maybe you can try it and then send me a copy of what you're doing. I'd like to see that. So, and pass this information on to your friends. Let them know what you saw, and have them check in on my broadcast.
In our Facebook group.
I have a Facebook group that also can check me out and give me some comments, and I'd like to hear from you. So I'll be here again next Thursday at 2 o'clock. Bye for now.